Global finance is being reshaped, and it is powered by digital infrastructure that never sleeps. On Interconnected, a new podcast by Equinix that explores the hidden infrastructure behind our connected future, they lay out the trends that make tomorrow's banking system possible. Project Liberty Institute CEO Sheila Warren, Wormhole Foundation co-founder Dan Reeser, and Gauntlet CTO and co-founder Ri Chiang explore the ongoing progress of decentralized finance. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's your host, Aaron, and a few notes before we dig into the show this week. First off, I hope everyone enjoyed NVIDIA GTC in Washington, D.C. this week. I wasn't able to make it because I started a new role at a different company, and this is week one, so I wasn't able to travel this week. But I will be at AI Dev 25, a one-day AI developer conference in New York City next month. If anyone will be there and wants to meet up, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me, aaron@thecloudcast.net. Second, for this week's show, we had a few sound issues, and I'm hoping you can bear with us. Our guest, Soham, had to relocate outside at the last second, and of course, the wind kicked up a few times during the recording. For the aspiring audio engineers out there, I used a process called noise gating to mute his line when he's not talking. So you only hear it when he is speaking, and I blended his track back into mine. This only happens when he is speaking, and it's worse in the beginning, but then it calms down at the end. So again, our apologies on that. But I believe you'll find the discussion worth listening to. And that brings us to our topic this week. We are talking about AI data analytics with Soham from WisdomAI. Now, I worked for Soham at Rubrik, and he is an amazing technologist. And as Rubrik transformed data protection and cybersecurity, I believe the same is possible for business intelligence and analytics. And that discussion is coming up right after this break.
Today's show is brought to you by TestCube. Testing applications in Kubernetes doesn't have to be complicated. TestCube is your go-to platform for cloud-native continuous testing. With TestCube, you can orchestrate, scale, and automate tests effortlessly right within Kubernetes, catching issues early and deploying with confidence. Try it out today and see why engineering teams trust TestCube to keep their testing simple and scalable. Your test, your tools, your infrastructure, finally together. Check it out at testcube.io/cloudcast.
This week, we actually have a guest I've been meaning to talk to for a little while, and a topic actually I've been meaning to dig into as well, because we've been talking a lot about AI and hallucinations and large language models and RAG and all of these other things. But we also want to really take it a step further, if you will, and talk about some of the operational aspects of it all and what really happens under the covers once we really apply a bunch of data to all of this. And so we're going to be talking about AI and AI data analytics today. And for that, we have Soham Mazumdar, co-founder and CEO at WisdomAI. So first of all, Soham, welcome to the show, and give everyone a quick introduction, please.
Yeah. So Aaron, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite. So a bit of background on WisdomAI. So we are, in some ways, I'd like to call us a post-chat GPT company. Saw what was possible with large language models, and we are using it in the context of data analytics. So the product WisdomAI is a virtual data analyst, which anybody in an organization can use to get insights from their data. And what kind of separates us from something like a chat GPT is, first of all, we are looking at enterprise data. And enterprise data, when you're talking about, versus personal, the emphasis on accuracy, governance, guardrails, these are at like an absolute extreme point, and this is like a big point of difference with like consumer level tools. What WisdomAI does is that we come in, we connect into the enterprise data sources. It could be databases, it could be data warehouses, files, so on. And we build what we call as the context model of the organization, which in some ways is a synthesis of all the semantic knowledge of the organization. And this then powers the tool that the users within the organization can use to get direct insights from the data.
Nice. And so let's talk about real quickly, because for those that aren't aware, you were at Rubrik and helped start Rubrik before all of this, and you really helped scale Rubrik from inception all the way to the IPO was, I think, 5.6 billion, if I remember correctly. But I mean, it was in the billions in 2024. What was your kind of aha moment, if you will, that made you kind of go, okay, I did Rubrik. Rubrik was great. And you had, a great run at Google as well prior to that. But what made you leave all of that and kind of go, you know what, I think enterprise data analytics is the problem I want to go tackle next, right? Like yes. What made you think about that, first of all?
Yeah. So Aaron, I think you're rightly pointing out this is in some ways my third innings doing something interesting in the Valley. I started my career with Google. I was a member of the Google search team, joined the week of the Google IPO. That kind of like dates me in many ways. And, essentially been working with lots and lots of data, looking for, Google was all about doing search and insights from the data. And the Rubrik episode, which was, I would say, in some ways, one of my professional highlights. I was a co-founder of Rubrik. It's a cybersecurity company, started in 2014 and went public last year. And that was, what Google did was for public data. Rubrik was my first foray into enterprise data, right? And again, Rubrik's goal was about security of that data. But it kind of like just connected me to a lot of the key problems that you had to solve within enterprises. Fast forward to WisdomAI, when I was, I started the Rubrik journey when there was no company. But, when you start a company and you make decisions for a company, earlier on, it's essentially, like what I would describe as gut-driven decision-making. And as the company grows, as, revenue increases, as the team sizes grow, the need for making decisions with data is sort of like inevitable, like early on, you don't think about it, but later on, if you are not backing your decisions by data, you're essentially making things up. And that's not the way to run a company. So I kind of saw firsthand just how critical a role data played. And the other thing was, I tried to be the data analyst for Rubrik engineering, because when it was in its massive growth phase, and I failed miserably because it was not my day job. My day job was to run the organization. Data analytics was not something that I was spending all of my time on, and I just realized how hard it was and what kind of specialized tools, specialized training were needed to make it happen. So even though I had a very technical background, I knew all the business questions I wanted to answer. But for me to use these tools, data tools, to get the insights and answers I needed was extraordinarily hard. So again, fast forward to, I would say, towards the end of 2022, that's kind of when we started seeing ChatGPT coming in. And it just, like a light bulb moment happened, which was like, look, this technology that's been built for the external world, if it could be used and harnessed in the case of internal business data, there was a tremendous unlock that we could offer. But again, there was a key catch was, every enterprise is unique. Every enterprise data is unique. How do you kind of bridge the gap between these external models and the enterprise data? That was the real unlock that was necessary. And that's kind of what we are trying to solve with WisdomAI right now.
I love that. And so let's kind of dig into that, enterprise data for a little bit, because there's, There's always been these big data platforms that are out there like Snowflake and Databricks and some of these others, but I've heard this term kind of thrown around a couple times now of like, okay, you might be drowning in data, but you're starving for insights. And like what? Tell everyone like what's broken about traditional, BI or business insights and the stack, and what prevents a lot of users from getting answers today.
Great point. Great question. So if you look at like this term called the modern data stack, it's been around. I would say Snowflake, Databricks, these are the companies that kind of coined this term. And the basic premise of the modern data stack is you use a product like a Snowflake, Databricks, any of these, and you dump all the data that you can think of about the organization into these data platforms. So essentially, these become like these, central repositories of all sorts of information within the organization. Now, the challenge with insight is volume of data does not translate into the key business decision that you need to make, because there is this last mile of going from a big mass of data to the final nugget of information that will help you make the final business decision. That problem was simply unsolved, right? So you kept building machine engines that could process more and more volumes of data, but nobody solved the last mile problem. And the problem with the last mile is the business decision maker is not a data scientist. A business decision maker is like, a person with like some business degree, they're in an operational role, they are doing sales, they're doing marketing, they're doing all sorts of a variety of different business functions. They are not trained data analysts, they are not trained data scientists. So they do not know, they don't know Python, they do not know SQL. These are the languages that you need to know in order for you to get value from the data that's within like a Snowflake. So there was a disconnect, right? So the data users didn't know the language that was necessary to extract information. So that was one. The second, this is a general rule. The more data you have, the more noise you have. The more of it you have, the more effort it takes to get the insight out. So that was another thing. Enterprise data is just fundamentally noisy, and it requires a lot of effort to kind of get the final value out of it. And then, if you look at some tools that existed in the past in terms of how business users would consume the data, dashboards, that's like the most common way in which people in a business look at data is through dashboards. And the big challenge with dashboards is that they're essentially static. Somebody thinks of, here are the 5 things you, Mr. Business User or Miss Business User, you should be looking at. And 9 out of 10 times when I see a piece of data on a dashboard, and I see a chart going somewhere and I see a number, it almost always makes me think of, why did this happen? And when I then ask somebody a question, like, why did this happen? They give me an answer, and that spurs yet another question for me, right? So inevitably, you need a system that's extraordinarily interactive, as opposed to something that just gives you a static lens into the data, right? So you have many challenges, right? Challenge number one, there's a huge language barrier. The business user does not understand how to wrangle data. And number two, the tools that need to be built have to be very, very interactive so that it allows for this endless Q&A capability from the end user. So these are like some of the challenges that need to be solved. And hence, again, more and more data was possible to be churned through did not mean businesses were in fact getting the lift that they thought they would be getting.
Sure. Okay. That's super helpful. Thank you. I'm going to ask you I'm going to lump 2 questions into one, almost like a data quality or data trust question all in one of, okay, one of the biggest things I think of, especially with the enterprise and Gen AI, is this concept of hallucination. So how do you know what the answer you're being provided with truly is the answer, if you will? But then also there's a data quality, a problem, especially with unstructured data. If you've got data kind of all over the place, you might have dirty data, and that reflects on a poor quality. And so how do you make sure, especially with BI projects, that you've got good quality data, good stuff going in so you don't have bad stuff coming out. And B, those answers being generated are truly what they are, and there's not hallucinations or anything else potentially going on.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the crux of all of these things is, how do you end up trusting the answers that you're kind of getting from these systems? And there is a related question, which is often what happens is there is a constituency in an organization who is responsible for bringing a data solution to a broader group within an organization. So the question becomes, how do you have guardrails? How do you have governance so that this centralized group of data experts have the ability to, in a trustworthy manner, empower the rest of the people? So anyways, that's the problem to solve. So, there are few things that you kind of need to do in order to kind of handle this. First of all, again, language models are trained on vast amounts of data. The thing that is missing is they're not trained on your data, right? So there is this bridge that needs to be built between your data and language models. This is what we, within WisdomAI, we call it the context layer. You can think of it as the organizational memory that has all the tribal knowledge, all the low-level nuances of the data. And oftentimes what happens is that organizations are terrible at documenting things. For example, it's like, okay, somebody new comes in an organization. You cannot, almost nowhere will you be able to give them, here is this manual, go read it and everything about your business, about this new business. That never happens, right? So inevitably, what you will be able to provide is something partial. And one of the big innovations that we did with WisdomAI was, how do we build a workflow that takes this partial view into your data and builds a learning engine that, with a human in the loop, understands the intricacies of the data, so that we get the data steward to participate in training the model to understand the business nuances. Because if you don't have a data steward participating, if you try to go for full automation, you will never build that trust. Because fundamentally, the data stewards have a ton of tribal knowledge that they carry that needs to be kind of inserted. So that's one piece. The second piece is how we query the data. We actually use these, small data programs, written in Python, written in SQL. One of the big good properties of using these programs is, in some ways, they are very easy to introspect, right? So when we kind of give a proof of what the work that we have done, we give the proof in the form of saying, hey, here is the exact math that we have done to come up with some of these answers. So this traceability, this ability to be able to really understand what work is being done, that goes a long way. And lastly, by having these programs, there is a lot of proof, automatic validation that comes. Ultimately, it's not just AI just made up an. So if you ask the question, how is my revenue doing? I'm not going to say 42 million. Let's not make up a random number. It's going to be, here is the math I did. Here is the data source I used. Here are some example metrics that I've used. So there's a lot of proof and math that we show, which is kind of what gives you the validation that the answers are correct. Because it cannot just be, here is a number, because that's something that you will never be able to trust.
That's perfect. I love that. I think that's a great place to finish as well. So, Soham, if anyone out there is kind of interested in learning more or asking you questions or reaching out, what's the best way that they could get started?
Okay, so our website, of course, that's askwisdom.ai. So it's ASK wisdom, one word, .ai. I am happy to give out my own phone email. If folks are interested in sending me an email, that'll be a soham@askwisdom.ai. Happy to get on a call. Anyway, if you want to set up a demo, the easiest way is go to the website. There's a demo button that'll connect us to some of us to give you a demo. But I am always open on email as well. That's fine. Not a problem.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. I certainly appreciate your time this week. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for your time as well. On behalf of Brian and myself, thank you very much for listening. And if you enjoy the show, wherever you get your podcasts, please, if possible, leave us a review or tell a friend as well. And we're always interested in feedback as well. show@thecloudcast.net if you have any feedback or also ideas for topics or guests. So thank you very much, Soham, for your time this week. And everyone out there, thank you for your time. And we will talk to everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.